Hello. In this lecture, we are going to talk about the harp. If you write for the harp, you have to take the following points into consideration. First, available pitch material. On the harp, there are only 7 different pitch classes, which are C, D, E, F, G, A, and B, with 2 chromatic alterations, which are flat and sharp. That means each of the pitches can be either flat or natural or sharp. And this is the second point, the use of the pedals. The harp has 7 pedals. The pedals of the harp are not the same as the pedals of the piano. As I said, each of the pitches could be either flat or natural or sharp, and this is controlled by a pedal mechanism. 7 pedals for 7 individual pitches. And finally, the limitations of the hands. Only the first 4 fingers are used. That means there's no little finger, and the maximum range of the hand is about a tenth. That means the range is a little larger than the range on the piano. The harp has a pretty large range, covering all the pitches from C flat 0 to G sharp 7. However, harp is not a chromatic instrument in sense of the piano, for example. We cannot play a chromatic scale. As I said, there are 7 pitches with chromatic alterations, and this is controlled by a pedal mechanism. And this mechanism has some limitations. This is our modern harp, and you see here the pedal mechanism. From the point of the view of the player, it looks like this. 7 pedals, 3 of them are on the left hand side and controlled by the left foot, and 4 of them are on the right hand side and controlled by the right foot. And you see here the corresponding pitch classes. This one controls the pitch class D, this one C, and this one B. That means if I change the position of the pedal from here to here, for example, all the B's on the harp in all the octave registers will change. And the right hand side begins with E, F, G, and A. It is very important to remember this order because we are going to use it also in the notation. Samuel Adler suggests this sentence, this nonsense sentence, in order to remember the order of the pedals. Did Columbus bring enough food going to America? And the first letters corresponds to the order of the pedals on the harp. If you remember this sentence, then you will remember the order of the pedals on the harp. Let's take a closer look at the pedal mechanism. You see there are 3 positions for each pedal. This is the first position, this is the second position, and where the pedal is at the moment is the third position. If the pedal is in the first position, in the beginning, this is the beginning position, all the corresponding pitches will be flat. Let's say this is our D pedal. In the first position, all these in the harp will be D flat. That means we will not have any D naturals or any D sharps. If we change the position of the pedal from the first position to the second position, then all these in the harp will be D natural. That means we will not have any D flats and any D sharps. And if we change the position of the pedal from the second position or from the first position directly to the third position, then all these will be sharp. This is the primary limitation of the harp. This limitation affects the playability of some passages. For example, such a passage in which we have successive chromatic alterations are very difficult, if not impossible, to play on the harp. Also here, although we have one more pitches between them, it is still difficult because the pedal has to be changed exactly between them after plucking E flat, not too early, not too late, exactly before the beginning of the E natural, from E flat to E natural. It is technically difficult, the timing, changing the pedals while playing, and the change of the position of the pedal will produce some undesired noises. Therefore, we should always avoid notations like this. Sometimes it is very easy to correct the notation. For example, let's write the passage once again, this time more suitable for the harp. Let's keep E flat, and instead of E natural, we can use F flat, the enharmonic spelling. So, in this case, there won't be any change of the position of the pedal. And B flat, A flat. Instead of B natural, we can use C flat. We avoided one more change of the pedal. And instead of D flat, we could use C sharp. But we have here C flat, and this is a large change of the position. They are 2 steps away. So let's take a look at these 3 notes once again. Maybe we can find another solution for these 3 notes. Instead of B flat, I'm going to write A sharp. And instead of A flat, I'm going to write G sharp because they are not present in this passage. And I will use B natural. So, through enharmonic respelling, we created a playable notation from an unplayable notation. Now, there is no change of pedal position necessary. Pedal positions have a special kind of notation. It looks like this. This is the exact demonstration of the order of the pedals on the harp. Remember the order. It begins with D, C, and B, and the right-hand side begins with E, F, G, and A. We have one horizontal line. This is our reference line. And then this is the division between left-hand side pedals and right-hand side pedals. And 3 positions of the pedal. If these lines, these vertical lines, thick vertical lines are exactly in the middle on the line, that means the pitch is on the second position, which means all the pitches are natural. This is another organization of the pedals. The order of the pedals is the same. It is always the same. It begins with D, C, and B, on the left hand side, and on the right hand side it begins with E, F, G and A. And as I said, it is an exact demonstration of the actual positions, order and positions of the pedals on the harp. If the thick vertical line is above the horizontal line, that means the first position, which makes the pitches flat. This is natural. And if the thick vertical line is below the horizontal line, that means this is the third position, which makes all the pitches sharp. And also here we have two flat positions, one sharp position and another flat position. We use this diagram before the beginning of the passage, at the beginning of the piece anyway, and before the beginning of the main passages. This is a preparation for the harpist, and that indicates the alterations of the pitches in the following passage. And a final example about this. Always remember the order of the pedals. It begins with D on the left hand side, C and B. And on the right hand side it begins with E and goes upwards. So, and the positions, this is in the middle, in the second position. That means it is D natural. And this is below the line, which means third position, sharp position. And above the line means flat position, sharp position. In the middle, that means natural. In the first position, that means flat, and this is also natural. Creating a pedal diagram in Sibelius is easy, just you have to know how to do it. First of all, harp is under strings. While you choose the instruments, harp is in the strings. Get a score and create a score. So let's say we want to create a diagram, a pedal diagram for the harp. We have to use a text. Let's use expression text and note that letters M, N and L. M for natural, N for sharp and L for flat. O a divider and again M for natural, L for flat, N for sharp. Let's write L again for the flat. And this is the order of the pedals. In this case, we wrote natural for D, the second position, and then sharp for C, flat for B, and then we put a divider, E natural, F flat, G sharp, A flat. So, but you see, we have only the letters. We have to change the text. Go to the text tab. Choose Opus Text Standard. And you see we have a harp diagram now. And we have to change also this style from italic to regular. This is our diagram. And place it at the beginning. And you can make it bigger if you like by increasing the size of the text. So you have to keep those letters, those 4 letters in mind, the order of the pedals and those 4 letters. They are all capital letters, uppercase letters, L for flat, M for natural, and N for sharp. And use O for the divider line. Text should be opus text, STD for standard, and style should be regular. There are also some other methods to show the pedal positions. The principle is the same. The pedals D, C, and B, and here E, F, G, and A. But the demonstration changes. That means the pedal is at the bottom, third position, D sharp, and this is in the middle, C natural, and this is in the first position. That means B flat, E flat, F, G sharp, and A flat. It is also possible to show the position with the letters, directly with the letters. The order is the same. And this is also another way. But the one I showed in the previous slides is the most common method to show the pedals today. Although you can also encounter these variants in some scores. This is an example from the literature by Debussy. A very typical harp technique is glissando, and you see the notation of the glissando, how to show a glissando on the harp. The pedal positions, by the way, this is not the technique, the method we use today. The pedals have been shown in arbitrary order here because it was not standardized yet in Debussy's time, but today we have a standardized notation. If you write a glissando, the common method is to write the 7 pitches entirely. And then you use a line until the end of the glissando. You note the end of the glissando. And if you want to continue with the glissando, another line and the end point of the other glissando. If you take a look at the pitches, we will notice that A sharp and B flat, they are the same pitch. C sharp and D flat, the same. E and F flat, the same, and G sharp. This is actually an A half diminished 7th chord. It looks like a glissando, but it is actually an arpeggiation. If you use the limitations of the harp creatively, you can get many interesting results. Let's listen to it. This is probably the most characteristic sound of the harp, the glissando. Here we see an incorrect notation, incorrect because we have F natural and F sharp at the same time. It is not possible. We have to correct it. Instead of F natural, we have to write E sharp. And this time, there is no problem at all. A similar problem we see here in the A part. The music comes and goes between G minor and G major. But if you want to write this passage for the harp, we have to make some enharmonic adjustments, enharmonic respellings. We cannot change B flat, we cannot write it as A sharp because we have also a natural, but we can write B natural as C flat. This is the correct notation for the harp without any chromatic alterations of the pitches. So no change in the pedal positions is needed. However, that does not mean that we cannot change the pedal while playing. It is possible, and the harp players train this, practice this. But you should keep in mind, it depends on the tempo, it depends on the complexity of the passage, and it depends on the abilities of the harp player. So we have here F sharp, and one beat after that we have F natural. Let's say the tempo is Adagio, meaning slow. And there is a pedal change. What the player has to do is to pluck the string first and then mute it somewhere here. This is the mute symbol. We can also show it with the notation. Mute it and change the pedal, because if he plucks the string, then it will continue to vibrate for a while. And making a pedal change, pedal position change while the pitch is still vibrating will create a sudden shift in the pitch from F sharp to F major. It is not a glissando, it is a sudden shift with a distortion noise. Some composers used this noise as a special effect. The pedal between F sharp and F natural, for example, it creates a noise effect. But in the conventional music, it is very undesired. So, if the tempo is slow, then it is possible. But still, we have to avoid it. We can use an harmonic spelling, or we can leave some pitches out. In this case, an harmonic spelling will not be possible. We cannot write this pitch as E sharp because we have already an E. We cannot write this F sharp as G flat because we have already a G. So it is possible but difficult, and you should always avoid, as a general rule, as few pedal position change as possible. Another example from the classical literature, taken from the Concerto for Flute and Harp by Mozart. If you write for the harp, you have to think about piano notation and consider the limitations of the harp. Let's listen to the excerpt. As you see at the beginning, we have the pedal diagram, and all the pitches are in the second position, which means all the pitches are natural because the passage is in C major. You also see some alterations here, C sharp, and then here D sharp. We heard here a C natural. That means the harpist should change the position of C pedal somewhere after this note and before this note. So C becomes C sharp, and also we heard here a D natural, and after D natural but before D sharp there should be another change from D to D sharp. Today we have to indicate the pedal changes, and in the middle. This has to be here, C to C sharp. C, I put it in parentheses because only the new pedal position is written mostly. And the another thing I like to mention is the sustain of the pitches. In the piano we have a sustain pedal, but in the harp we don't have a mute mechanism. In the piano, if we press a key, then the pitch sustains until we release the key. But in the harp, if we pluck a string, it sustains until the player mutes it with his or her hand. If you write for the harp, you should also consider this fact. For example, here, after playing D natural, before playing C sharp, the player has to mute all the Ds, otherwise they will sound together and this will create an undesired sound in this kind of music. By the way, this diagram was not written by Mozart himself because at that time the notation was not invented yet. It is added by the author of the book. So let's listen to it again. This is the position of the hands on the harp. I like to mention a couple of things. First of all, the little finger is not used on the harp. We have only 4 fingers. And the other thing is, this is the right hand playing the higher pitches and left hand playing the lower pitches. And between thumb and the index finger, we have more distance than between other finger. That means if you write a chord, then large intervals should be used on the top. And you see also different colors of the strings. This is black and this is red. This is for the easier identification of the pitches of the strings. Here are some examples of the chords. In the recording, you will hear these 3 chords played non-arpeggiato, that means without arpeggiation. But in the praxis, in the conventional music, if you write something like that for the harp, they will play it automatically arpeggiated. This is a convention in the harp music. Although today, in the modern notation, we have to notate the arpeggiation exactly. Let's listen to the chords. As I said, we use only 4 fingers. That means the maximum number of the notes per hand is 4. But the chords which consist less notes than 4 sound more effective. And the range of the hand is a tenth. This corresponds to 1 octave on the piano, approximately. And about arpeggiation. If you don't want the chord to be played arpeggiated, then we have to use this vertical bracket with the expression plaqué. That means non-arpeggiated. And we can also determine the speed of the arpeggiation. For example, here a slow arpeggiation is indicated. And you notice we have much more notes in the chord than 8, which was our limitation. The exception is arpeggiation. If there's an arpeggiation, then the player can use the hands alternately. For example, player can start with the left hand and then play this one with the right hand. And once again, left hand, right hand, etc. But if the chord is to be played non-arpeggiated, then we should stay within the limit, maximum 4 notes per hand. We can also determine the kind of the arpeggiation. Those symbols are the same. We can use different symbol, an arrow, or this waveform, or only this. These 3 are the same. And this is the direction. The difference between writing something like that and this is the following. If you write a continuous line for both staves, that means the arpeggiation will begin with C sharp, G, D, and then continue with B, F sharp, and B. But if you write something like this, if you divide the line, that means this C sharp and this B will be played together, and this G and F sharp will play together, and this D and B will be played together. So, and the arpeggiation in the opposite direction, in this case this C sharp and this B will be played together, G and F sharp and B and approximately. And here one hand plays the chord non-arpeggiated and the other hand arpeggiated. As I already mentioned, we have more distance between the thumb and the index finger than between the other finger. This one will be played with the thumb and this one with the index finger. The large intervals should be placed on the top of the chords because of this anatomic reason. It is also true for the left hand. This one would be more difficult to play because this one will be played with the fourth finger, with the ring finger, and this one with the middle finger. And this one is impossible to play because there are too much distance between the middle finger and the ring finger. Be careful about the voicing of the chord. The large interval should be placed on the top of the chord. An example from the literature, and you see here the large interval is placed on the top of the chord, and also here, etc. Let's listen to the excerpt. Let's create a pedal diagram for this excerpt. We have our horizontal line and then a divider. So remember the pedals D, C and B on the left hand side and E, F, G and A on the right hand side. So D, we see D is sharp. That means it should be in the third position below the line. And C, we see here, C is sharp. It is also in the third position. They shouldn't touch each other. This is important. This is easier to read. And what about B? B is natural. Then it should be in the middle. So E, we have our first E here. It is natural. And F is also sharp below the line. G, we have our G here, it is natural. And A, our first A is here, which is also natural. This should be placed at the beginning of the piece of the passage. And there are some changes, actually only one change, I guess, this A flat. And you should look for an appropriate position to change it from A to A flat. For example, it could be somewhere here, A flat. And also we have another change from B to B flat. We have a rest. This is good for the pedal change. Let's write here B flat. You have to do this work. You have to write the diagram at the beginning and then the pedal changes. If you don't do this, then the harpist will have to do it, and it is not his job. It is your job as composer or orchestrator. Another example from the literature, from Ein Deutsches Requiem by Brahms. The harp part is here, and we will hear only the harp, not the orchestra. Let's listen to it. Another very important thing that you should consider in the notation is the hands, the division between hands. You should make it clear. This is also your job. You see here, this part of the line is played by the left hand, and this one you see here, rest for the left hand. These four notes will be played by the right hand. And again, left hand, right hand, left hand, right hand, etc. And you should also divide the chords correspondingly, which tones will be played by the left hand and which tones will be played by the right hand. And you see here also a clear division of the hands. For example, here it is very clear that the last note of the triplet will be played by the right hand. And also here, this is the left hand, and then comes the right hand, and the top, once again, left hand. Another example by Debussy. Also here you see the clear division of the hands. These three notes will be played by the left hand, and these three notes will be played by the right hand, etc. Let's listen to the excerpt. As I said, on the harp there is no mute mechanism which we have on the piano. If the player plucks a string, then it will continue vibrating. In the conventional music, the player determines when to mute the string, after a while, after the duration, etc. In the modern music, if you want the pitch to continue vibrating, you should indicate it with let vibrate, with the abbreviation of let vibrate. And if you want a note to be muted, like in this case, then you have to indicate it with the mute to be sure that it is going to be muted. And you see here, C will not be muted, but E will be muted at the end of the measure. By the way, you can use a tie, let vibrate tie, or this abbreviation, or both, but I do not recommend to use both every time. The let vibrate tie is very common, and it is enough if you use only let vibrate tie. The harmonics are very common in the harp, and they are notated as shown here. A normal notation with a circle above it. The important part is that they sound one octave higher. That means this will sound here, and this one will sound here, the A, B, etc. And they are the second partial. That means the first overtone. In the right hand, only one harmonic can be played at once, but in the left hand, we can play up to 3 harmonics at the same time. The condition is all of the strings, all of the pitches should have the same accidental. Either all of them should be flat, or all of them sharp, or all of them natural. And they should lie within the range of a fifth. For example, this harmonics can be played, and the sound will be one octave higher. We can also combine the harmonics with non-harmonics. In this case, the sound will be interesting. We will hear the sound as normal, plucking string, and then as harmonic. Note that the sound will be the same. The sounding pitch will be the same. Also here, one octave higher. This is like an echo, like a colored echo. We can also use them in unison. The sound will be the same because the harmonics will sound one octave higher. And this is then a doubling, a unison doubling. A literature example by Debussy. The right hand plays the notes regularly and the left hand plays them as harmonics. Let's listen to it. And another example by Ravel. This is an orchestral work, and we have two harps. The second harp plays an accompaniment figuration by plucking the strings normally, and the first harp plays harmonics. Let's listen to it. And you see the enharmonic spelling D flat, C sharp, D flat. Instead of repeating, the repetition of the tones is not especially effective in the harp. If you want to repeat a tone and if you have an option to do it through an enharmonic spelling, then use it. D flat, C sharp, D flat, it is much more effective. And a final example, you see here the pedal position changes, but this is not actually a literature example. Salcedo was an excellent harpist himself, and this is for solo harp and etude, a study. So do not take it as an optimal example. It is an artistic piece. Such changes are not recommended. To change the pedal before every pitch, it is difficult. So let's make a diagram for this excerpt. Write our horizontal line and then the divider, and remember the order of the pedals, F, G and A. And what about D? You see D is sharp at the beginning, at least. After that it becomes natural. That means it should be in the third position. C is sharp, and then after that C natural. Let's write it as we are going to indicate the initial positions first, because the changes will be indicated afterwards. And B is natural, that means in the middle. E, we have our first E here, and it is sharp. F is sharp anyway. G is also sharp, excuse me. G is here. The first G is here, so sharp, and A is here. It is natural. Let's listen to it. As you heard, the sound of the harmonics is very transparent. Probably the most characteristic playing technique of the harp is the glissando. This technique is strongly associated with the harp, glissando and arpeggiation. We have many ways to show a glissando. This is a simple way, the A, the beginning point and a diagonal line, end point, etc. Always with the indication glissando. And here, this is in the conventional music more common and also a clearer way to notate the glissando. Write the first 7 pitches and then use the line. It looks more professional. And we can also do it with intervals, 2 lines at the same time. The notation is the same. And more notes are also possible. And this is also another way. This is like giving the pedal diagram. You can also use the pedal diagram. Let's draw a diagram very fast. Recall the positions. And E goes upwards. D is flat, that means in the first position. C is natural in the middle. B is also flat. E is flat. F is natural. G is flat. And A is also flat. So this is the same actually, giving them in parentheses and then write it with glissando shape. And this is an example. We are not using this method, this way of showing the pedals today. We are using the diagram. Let's listen to it. And glissandi with multiple voices. 2 voice glissandi. And 3 voice glissandi. Trills and tremolos are doable on the harp, but they are very quiet sounds. So in the orchestral music, they are not effective because they are very quiet. Therefore, they are mostly used in the chamber music or solo repertoire. There are many ways to realize a trill, but the most common way is dividing the pitches between 2 hands. This is a G and A flat trill. The first G and A flat will be played by the right hand and then by the left hand, right hand, left hand, etc. It is also possible to play it by only one hand, but this is the preference of the most harpists. The same is true for the tremolos, but as I said, the repetition of one pitch is not effective because the string needs some time to vibrate. In such cases, an harmonic spelling helps a lot. Instead of repeating the G sharp, it will be played as G sharp and A flat and divided between 2 hands. This will be played by the right hand and then the left hand, right hand, left hand, etc. And also other tremolos and harmonic spelling where possible. For D, there's no other option, but for F sharp, we can use G flat alternately. This will make the sound more beautiful. That's all for the harp. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next lecture.